My name is Monk Rowe. I'm very pleased to have Ben and Alex with me today from Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. And I had the pleasure of talking to Jeremy and Greg earlier and told them that I had just seen the oddest video of pigeons actually playing ping pong.
Yeah. What's almost weirder than the name is the fact that it was actually a real thing. Is first people assume it was just some made up nonsense, and then you find out about the actual
Yeah,
experiment. It's still pretty much nonsense, but
right.
it adds a little more realness to it.
Was it called well, B.F. Skinner was a Hamilton College graduate
No
where,
way.
where I'm
Wow, look at that.
zooming from. Yes.
How about it?
That's
Band
funny.
names are funny, like if the band becomes successful, then it's a good name.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they might have mentioned, but at the time it was more so just them doing an acoustic little duo set. So it was, hey, we need a name. Here's some funny alliteration, and
Okay.
things stick.
I remember having friends a few years into it. They're like, "You guys need to just go by Pigeons. Like Pigeons Playing Ping Pong is a little goofy." I was like, "It's Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. That's just what it is." And like you said, if it succeeds, then it must have been a good name.
Yeah. Ben, were those two guys together for a while and then they recruited a bass player?
Sort of. They were an acoustic duo freshman year. I actually played a gig or two with another band, actually with the guitarist who ended up recording our first album at the university radio station. That was at UMUC. I forget the name of it, but it was at College Park. So I played a few shows, saw them play a couple times, and then I moved off campus sophomore year, and they were still on campus, and they needed a place to jam. They brought a drummer friend they met in history of rock class, I believe, and they came over to my house to jam, and they didn't have a bass player, so that's how it happened.
Were you a bass player in high school?
I picked up a bass for the first time at my friend's 16th birthday party when he got a new bass, and I was like, this is cool. And he let me play his bass at his birthday party for like the whole time, and I was just smitten.
What kinds of tunes would smitten you that you would hear on the radio because of the bass part?
Well, the one he taught me was the incorrect bass line to Smoke on the Water. So the one that follows the guitar chords.
That's always the first song anyone ever learns
Yeah,
on.
but the real bass line is do 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 do. So my first thing I learned was actually wrong. But he also a year or two before that introduced me to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was looking for a CD to buy at Borders, uh, Books and Music, which no one under the age of whatever will remember even existed. But he showed me Red Hot Chili Peppers' greatest hits, and I burned that CD out basically.
Because what's the guy's name? Flea?
Lee, yeah, he's another first name bassist. That's sort of where I got my inspiration
Ah,
from.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask a question of both of you. I think sometimes certain kinds of personalities are attracted to certain instruments. Alex, do you agree with that? I mean, drummers are usually fill in the blank.
Oh man. I think for me it was definitely, which doesn't apply to all types of drums, but definitely kind of the slightly more like physical approach to it, and kind of more of a visceral, like that kind of the physical side of it, I guess, kind of always appealed to me. I mean, I started at such a young age. I started taking lessons when I was 5, and I grew up, very active, very bouncing off the walls, also with, sports and activities. I was just kind of always on the run and always kind of bopping around. So I don't know if that kind of played into the more percussive, side of my personality. I know, with a lot of people, there's a lot of trial and error with different instruments. My brother and sister, they're both great musicians, and they bounced around and tried a bunch of different instruments. I kind of just always had that kind of initial reaction to the drums, and kind of, the feeling and kind of the physical aspect of it, and that rhythm kind of percussiveness to it has just kind of naturally appealed to me. Yeah.
Were there drummers that you paid attention to inspired you?
At an early age, it was definitely more of, a product of what I was hearing, with my parents, obviously a lot of like classic rock, a lot of drummers like Keith Moon, John Bonham, the classics that you hear, but a lot of guys like, Richie Hayward from Little Feat, and a lot of guys that, really held down that pocket for me. The flashy side's great too, and you have guys that crush on all aspects to it, but just a lot of it was just those guys, there was just those really good strong backbeats. And it initially, it led to different styles and kind of me diving down different roads and different styles, and that brought about whole new interest to me. But that classic rock vibe kind of initially is what appealed to me, and kind
How
of
about
grown
you,
from
Ben?
there.
I don't know if we can make a generalization about bass players, but traditionally they're not they don't spend a lot of time in the spotlight.
Yes, traditionally they don't. I think um, for me, I didn't really thrive in that spotlight. I remember the first time I played on stage with Pigeons. I believe it was like at least our first gig at a real music venue at the Record Theater in Towson. Um, I was standing there basically like kind of rocking side to side, expressionless, just like so focused on playing, nervous to be heard or seen by anyone. Even when I first picked up bass at home, I would keep the volume in my room really low because I didn't want my family hearing it. I was just very shy about it. Versus, I feel like some guitarists are like, the fail forward mentality is just like, let's go at it and make it happen. I was very, I don't know if it's protective of my progress or like how I wanted to approach it, but yeah, I guess a little shyer at first. I've sort of been able to come out of my shell a little bit thanks to Pigeons and sharing the stage with all those guys.
How much of the bass lines you conceive and play? I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. Are actually connected to the chord symbol and the scales that might go with it. Do you think that way, or are you more of an ear player?
Well, I started out much more of an ear player and just sort of taking the same shape over different root chords. So I learned from my bass teacher, Dave DeMarco, the blues pentatonic scale, and just kind of threw that shape over everything. I actually started on piano, so I learned, the Suzuki method and scales a little bit on piano. So when I put it on bass, I saw it as more of a pattern rather than the notes on a piano, and I overlay it a bit in my head, but I got a lot of mileage out of just taking that same shape and either taking that minor third, making it major, taking the flat seven and tossing a minor six on it here and there, and applying that pattern to my ear. And then over time, especially with some parts that Jeremy has written, understood more about how those scales are interacting and how, to lead between different chords. So it's sort of started out as a lot more ear and a lot more single pattern with small little adjustments here and there. And then I've sort of been coming at it from the other end, trying to bring that knowledge of theory together, to put that together, you know.
Alex, you joined the group when,
2016. Yeah.
and had you heard them beforehand?
I had a little bit, not too much actually. I had seen them once or twice in college. Coincidentally, the college band I played in, our guitarist grew up with Jeremy. So we brought us to his hometown and we opened for Pigeons once when I was in college, and that's kind of where I really met them. And that was a fun. That was a small little show in Hartford.
Good pizza.
Yeah, that was yeah, pizza, good pizza, Sully's. Um, and then yeah, I went to school in Hartford, Connecticut. Played in kind of the Northeast New England area. Never full time as my full on profession. And about a year after school, I was still working in New Haven, going to New York on the weekends to play, and zipping back to Connecticut to work and kind of doing the whole back and forth. And it was fun. It was draining. It was a lot, but it was nice to finally get a random phone call from Jeremy. He's, hey, I don't know if you remember me. We hung out. I had remembered him, but we hadn't spent too much time together. And then it all kind of fit in nicely when it all happened. I went down there, auditioned a few times, and it went pretty smoothly. Yeah.
I can tell that from the three of us, we tried out two different drummers before that, and we're like, okay, it's not our old drummer. Like, chemistry might take some time to build back up. And we were at Greg's parents' house in Long Island, and Gator came in, and I think we were 30 seconds to a minute into the first song, which I believe was Time to Ride. And the three of us, without even really looking at each other, just shared the understanding, like, we're good. Like, we have a future now. It was almost instantaneous the way we connected and understood that we were going to be fine, thanks to Gator.
That's really curious, that it became apparent so quickly. Can you be specific why?
There's just a language you build up with the people you play with for a while, and we played with Dan since, they jammed at my house for the first time in '08. Many shows earlier. I don't know how many shows we were playing a year when Gator joined, but we were upwards of 180 shows a year at one point. 2012, 2013, still a lot once Gator joined. But just that much time with someone, I called it the ESPN with me and Dan. It's like ESP, just the funny name I use for it. But there's some aspect of that connection that I don't know if Gator picked up on what we were together and he just blended in nicely, or he had just some energy that tapped into that same thing. It just felt like you were conversing fluently right away, musically speaking.
Alex, do you remember if it was a big decision to quit your day gig?
It was, music from a young age was always my biggest passion. Growing up, I had great teachers. I got to study with the great Dave DiCenzo, who's an amazing world-class drummer, professor at Berkeley. I'm from up in New Hampshire. He lived pretty close by, so I was able to study with him. Jeff Harrington, another great drummer up there. So I always kind of had that passion, like music was it. I also always had that underlying fear of, if it doesn't work out, not having any sort of backup plan. And just kind of, that's how I was raised, is kind of that analytical kind of side. I'm always planning for the future. And, while I always knew it was, my biggest passion, I did kind of fear that, well, hey, if it doesn't work out, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. So, after college ended, I kind of did have that big decision. I was in a position where I was, playing enough shows to get by, but it was a big grind, and I kind of wanted to just set myself up for a little bit, more of a future, so that if I, did want to go for it again, I kind of had a little more stability in my life. So, of course, right when I got settled with that job, I got the call. So it was definitely a sign. And, I've always, I've always been pretty competitive, kind of stubborn guy. So in that sense of when I was given that chance, I really just, in my mind, was not going to let it, get past me. And I've had a lot of great preparation. One thing with that drummer, Dave DiCenzo, a part of our lessons was that, he would even have a section where he would give me some material to learn. And part of our lesson was I would show up as if it was a big audition for a group. And he would sit there at a table, and I would perform. He wouldn't say anything, it wouldn't be like, and then afterwards, he'd be like, tell me whether I got the gig or not. You know what I mean? And he'd give me any songs from, Pretzel Logic, Steely Dan, to Bishop Trotter and the Holy Spirit's gospel music. And, every lesson, it was like I was showing up for this big audition. And I think that trained me a lot to kind of, just different prep for different styles, because even Pigeons, as much as, now it's my heart and soul, at the time, even their style of music, it was an adjustment for me. It wasn't necessarily something that I grew up always playing. And specifically, technique wise, with kind of the more four on the floor dance grooves, and in kind of just the rhythmic structure of the music was an adjustment. So I kind of saw it as a great opportunity that I just didn't take any chance of letting get by. So it
If
worked
if
out.
either of you met someone who didn't know what you did, and then you tell them I play in a band, and they say, "What kind of music do you play?" Do you have an answer for that?
You know, I think our official answer for a while was high energy psychedelic funk music, which is still, as long as the band name as far as the description. It's one of those things where it is always changing. Ben, I'm sure, explains it differently as Jeremy and Greg. It's all encompassing, but it really does cover a lot of ground. Typically, I'll kind of say, you know, it does have that improv sense. We do a lot of improv in our set, which, tied with kind of the rock funk aspect, kind of gives it, as long with our production, our big lights, it kind of adds like that, psychedelic atmosphere where it's, it's a full on production, it's a full on show. And so while it's always changing, high energy psychedelic funk rock is, it's morphing. Ben could probably have a whole
Okay,
answer.
Ben, you get 3 words to describe.
Yeah.
So I would go, especially early on, I would say it's 3 words specifically: energetic psychedelic funk. What I would also do is I would just bring in bands that people would be familiar with. I would say, kind of like if Fish, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Talking Heads had a baby with George Clinton.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Two out of those three bands I often compare. I've say a lot of the time it's like a Chili Peppers meets Talking Heads with
With like Fish
with a little
jamming.
bit of like Pink Floyd. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Like,
Pink Floyd. Yeah, I meant. So it was. I think I did Pink Floyd, Talking Heads, Chili Peppers. Maybe I'd left out Fish. I think it was Pink Floyd, Talking Heads, Chili
that seems
Peppers,
like a good.
with George Clinton conducting.
Yeah.
Conducting.
Not to say we're at that
But
echelon.
neither one of you
No,
would
not even.
default to just say, "Oh, we're a jam band." Is that correct?
I always used to say we're a band that jams. The categorization of jam band to me often is, aside from like the big kahunas, it's guitar solos, a lot of just meandering this or that. We're a band that has our own style and substance and approach, both from a stage presence perspective and from a songwriting perspective, and just from the energy of what we put out. But we do take our songs on a lot of sonic journeys. We've hasn't been a lot of times, but we have done full sets of just improv a few times throughout, and we incorporate that into every show we do.
I'm glad you used the word meandering because um, I've heard jam bands or been in jams that it seemed to be, yeah, we're just meandering here. And I don't hear that from you guys. I hear this balance of uh, experimentation, but form at the same time. Like there's an intent going on there. When you build things up and you all seem to get this sense like time to move on, time to change, and that's very listenable.
Yeah, I think that's important. And and going back to, jam, obviously a lot of genres at their basic terms are so convoluted. Rock doesn't nearly, tie in progressive metal with, some sort of other, jazz, everything. It's such a wide array. And I think jam is almost even more of like a kind of convoluted term, in the sense where if we're talking about jam being, improv or kind of on the spot playing, then, isn't jazz technically the same thing in a lot of senses? There's a lot of rock bands with improv. There's a lot of, and even if you look at the jam scene, you look at a jam band flyer and there could be for a festival, and there's bands that are like basically metal bands that incorporate improv, and then there's reggae bands that incorporate improv, and then there's us, which is kind of more that rock, dance, funk side. So I, like you said, I think one important thing is that we do kind of like to have some sort of intent and theme, and I think a lot of it goes with, if you do, we play long concerts. It's typically two 75-minute sets plus an encore. So when you do have a lot of material and a lot of, jams or improv sections, things can get lost if they're kind of treated just as a let's just let things go free. While it is fun to play without those walls and just be free, when you are kind of in a setting like that where you're also trying to captivate the audience for such a long period of time, and I think there definitely is beneficial to have some more intent and structure within those jams.
And I think the structure of our set list design changes every night.
Yeah.
Jeremy works really hard, constantly, working on how things would go together, and then checks in with us. We check back in. We have ideas. We put out song ideas. Spending all that time ahead of the show and throughout the weeks and months and years that we've been playing allows we get into the moment to know where we're going with it, and allows that that space. When you have sort of constraint in certain ways, like this is where we're going, this is where we are, you have the freedom to really explore and not be afraid. Like, are we just meandering? But like, what are we really doing here? We know where we're going with it, and we've learned a lot of different moves that it's like, okay, go from the 2 to the 5, or 5 to the 1, back to the 2. We kind of keep those modal things in mind as we build things back up, and just have kind of learned what works from a very general standpoint with the crowd, versus just us, like bringing people into the moment together.
In your business, what does it mean to be the headliner?
I mean, I guess if you're just on your own, a lot of the times we'll do group tours, or if there's a tour of a different bands, we've been lucky enough to headline our own tours in the sense that, we'll, it's our show. We'll bring along an opener or a local support, but it's typically, it's a lot of time to kind of fill and produce a show every night, and those headlining tours are it's a lot of work, like Ben just mentioned. It's a new set list every night, and when we return to the city from the last time, we'll bring up that set list and make sure we're not repeating material, because we're also fans of music. We realize that a lot of fans of bands might only get a couple chances to see a band they love, maybe once a year, maybe once in their life. So when we do have, we've been part of great group tours as well. We're going to be on an upcoming tour with a couple other great bands, Andy Frasco and Dogs in a Pile, where it's co-headlining, where you'll kind of split the
That's what he looks like.
Oh yeah, there you go. You'll kind of split the main event, but those tours where we have been lucky enough, which is most of our tours, to kind of headline a tour, it's a lot to kind of keep things fresh, and keeps us on our toes. It's fun for us as well to go in and start a new journey each night. Yeah.
And to add to that, to me, a headline in our business most literally means that you're the headline of a marquee. Your name is at the top. So, bringing out fans, you're just headlining, whatever that would mean. I think Gator says what it means to us.
You always play last?
Yeah, I'm a headlining.
Typically, yeah.
Yeah. I just recall I was in a rock business in the 80s, and we would get excited that we were going to open up for any number of people, Rick Derringer or that kind of thing. And more often than not, it was a drag. The people weren't there to see us. We oftentimes felt the sound man was making us sound not too good, just in case. But do you ever get the sense that your audience is tired out after you're the third band? I mean, when I look at your videos, it looks like the flock is not tired out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of it is a lot of it is product of that kind of our general scene. Is it, ever since I started seeing, shows kind of in that rock jam scene, you're typically in for a marathon of a night, and it's definitely a battle. There's definitely times where we'll adjust the set. If we'll get towards kind of we're mid-second set and you can kind of, get a vibe that, people might be tiring out a little bit. Or if we're playing more, typically they're full two-set shows, but if we're playing on a Wednesday and we happen to be in, Tacoma or, Midwest or out west where we might not be a major market, we might still have a great crowd, but we'll maybe choose to do one long set instead of providing a set break. So we're always cognizant of the fact that we're putting on a production and a show, and well, we want to have the freedom on stage to kind of just do our thing. It's definitely important to take into account the show you're putting on, maybe not doing as an extended of a low dynamic jam later in a show, maybe not follow up such a large peak with a more of a ballad type tune later. It's like most musicians would shape their set lists, but we've typically on the fly even adjusted stuff or called audibles just to we're always kind of aware of putting on the best show and leaving people wanting more, but also our kind of one of our big things is kind of like beating people down with music so that afterwards they're like, whoa, all right, we got it all. It's riding that fine line. So
Yeah, satisfied but wanting more.
yeah.
I was able to do an interview with a drummer named Ed Soph, who was, one of those guys who played with everybody, but also a legend in the jazz education world. And we were
Nice.
talking about time with bass and bassists and drummers. And I'm just going to read a short quote from him. I've played with bass players. In the first tune, I go, oh God, this guy really plays behind the beat. So what I do is I go with that bass player and lock up at the slower tempo. Now there can be a problem. If I go down to where he is, he continues to slow down. That's a problem. Just like a bass player who plays on top, and when you join him, he wants to take off again. Is there such a thing as for you two as playing on top of the beat or behind the beat?
Absolutely. I think Ben could attest to that. We have a lot of, variety of kind of sounds we're pulling from, and we have a lot of up tempo dance beats where I think a big part of our sound is you'll hear the term four on the floor, where for anyone not aware, it's more of that constant kind of kind of a lot of what Ben and I will do with this group is we really will kind of provide those bass blocks. And within those bass blocks, yeah, there's a lot of times where with our more up tempo stuff, we're definitely pushing it. And then if we're playing more of a dub or reggae effect, or even just a slower tune, I think that's definitely something we'll dive into as far as feeling. And then on top of that, even like, I think a big part of our sound, which me and Ben do pretty well at, is working with dynamics and just volume control, and taking those peaks and valleys and bringing it down and being more subtle when it needs to be to let the guitars shine. I think in any genre, but particularly with bands who do a lot of improv, one thing I think that can get very easily overlooked is kind of those volume dynamics. And you could be ripping up there and you could be super locked in, but if everything is kind of just here the whole time without those feel changes or without those volume changes, it can get very stale. So like you said, kind of choosing where on the beat to lie, holding things, while I agree with that quote, it's a great point. You could adjust to one guy and then they might adjust to your adjustment. And, it's definitely something to be aware of. But I think both feel and dynamics are something that, Ben and I will try to really focus on to allow, the other guitars and vocals to shine. And we'll take our moments too, but, typically
Yeah,
it's
it's
that strong bass.
one of the advantages of playing with the same person for so long. Before we started recording, you jokingly introduce us. Like jazz players will meet each other for the first time after playing. We kind of know, like I know when Gator's really going to drag into something. I know when it's coming, and then when he goes into it, how to sort of respond to complement that. The other guys know how to respond to that as well, and just being, instead of having to find who to lock into, we sort of all lock around a central groove and tempo and unit that we share going forward. So one of us can be in front, one of us can be behind, both of us can be behind, both of us can be in front, but the four of us sort of know where that's at, and are letting that lead the way rather than any individual player.
Do you have stage monitors usually that are the sound that's coming out of it includes your own instrument?
Yeah, we all run on our own individual mixes, but you do use in-ear monitors, and we have a great sound guy that we have our mixes all dialed in. Typically, I'll definitely want drums in there, just more for the visceral kind of feeling of playing and feeling everything. A lot of it I take is bass, and then just for reference, guitar and vocals, just as far as just to have a more of a pleasant general mix. But my mix is mostly honed in on the rhythm aspect, and just, it's tough because, as musicians, on one hand, you want what you're hearing to sound like mixed well, almost like an album where everything's like great, and but on the other
hand, the
hand,
audience is hearing out front. Yeah,
right. I over time have kind of realized what's more important to me providing a good show, and that's more hearing the bass and drums, and then just kind of trinkets of what I'll actually need, and enough of what that'll make me comfortable and be able to stay in the pocket. And then, a lot of groups will use, talk back mics and stuff, or different ways to communicate. We've generally kept ours just organic with just, we have little signals here, as you're well aware, as you play with guys, little, wide eyes could even easily tell someone, hey, bring it down. What are you doing? Yeah. So
yeah, the look.
Yeah, the look. So we all run our own mixes, but I assume they're all pretty similar in the sense of we take what we need to get dialed first, and then we'll kind of bring in.
Yeah, and what we need is different. For me, one of the struggles I've had over time is, especially when we all build up really loudly, in jams, hearing when Greg, our rhythm guitarist, is switching keys or like moving maybe up a progression. And so I've had to make sure to dial that in while still not having too much of it, like when he goes into his wah, to kind of overwhelm things. So our monitor guy, Mike, also will do some adjustments during and listening to the mix, just like the front of house sound guy does. But of course, he's trying to do that to 4 mixes. He'll mute our vocal mics in jams to keep things a little cleaner. I have my guitars split a little bit, so I have a little bit more of Jeremy on the right side, a little bit more of Greg on the left, so that I can distinguish what they're doing. But again, it's not ideal. Wouldn't really want to hear it with the guitars always split one direction or the other. It probably helps a little bit with the stereo imaging and like having the sound poke through better in a venue. But for me, it's just purely, can I tell what's going on? And then when I want to know what it sounds like, I listen back to the recordings on Nugs afterwards and critique our overall sound that way. But when I'm in the moment, it's just making sure I'm performing my part appropriately.
It's very common to be watching a band and you see one of the musicians look off stage at the monitor person and they point to the monitor, and then they go like this, right? People hardly ever point to the monitor and go like, give me less. It always just seems like more, give me more.
Well, you want to start less and then and add it from there, because if you start with too much, then you're losing the feel of the room too. So and in those moments you just want to make sure you can hear it. So I do kind of get that, but that is
no one else probably wants to see a fellow musician point to them and go down.
Yeah.
You're like, uh-oh, I must have done
those guitar players.
everything down.
Well, I have a couple signals. I mean, for my bass, I just go up and down. Greg, when he wants his vocals, turns to Mike and goes up or down. And then I have Jeremy's guitar 1, Greg's guitar 2. And so up or down, which is a very simple, quick thing. Just go down or up. And then same with their vocals too. Jeremy's this, up, Greg's this, up or down. And that's just very simple. I can do it quickly. I can do it kind of, I don't have to be like, hey, what's up? Like this and that. And
which I think is important. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I mean, I remember growing up, if I ever went to a show, it's like, I'd almost feel like I have like this allegiance to like, if I'm seeing him in my hometown, I'm like, I want these musicians I love to like love this venue. So like, if I were at a show growing up and I would see, a member frustratingly be like, like I'd almost be like, oh no, I hope hope they like, it's so funny. So I do think it's important to be subtle with your signals in general, or kind of be as smooth as you can. Cause like, there's no denying that if you ever, see someone, you're always like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it creates this kind of awkward tension. For some reason,
you get some guys who talk in the mic. Hey, could I get a little more? That's the worst.
Yeah, and you can have a talk back for that too, where you can just go to a mic and say something to your monitor guy. That's another advantage of talk back. But it brings to mind our old light guy was at a show. It was some outdoor venue somewhere in Pennsylvania, and I forget who it was, but it was some like world-renowned keyboardist. And he was dealing with the house crew, and they were sound checking, but it was at a festival setting, so it was outside, and everyone's watching them sound check, which is one of the worst parts about being a musician or an audience member, is just sitting there and watching a line check, public sound check. And the guy couldn't figure out how to turn down the keys in the monitor, and it was really loud. So the keyboardist just held down a key and just pointed down. He didn't like touch it and hold. He just went, and I was like, just hearing that, I'm like, oh God, that's, but that keyboard is like, we got to fix this. And like, I don't care. And, I think that's, it's not the way I'd approach that, but to each his own.
Yeah. Well, I noticed you were doing your hand signals with your right hand, which means you could sort of keep playing with your left hand, right? With your bass line.
Yeah, I really try to avoid doing that while playing. I'll try to find a moment in it. I had the one signal I really need is if the wah is coming in too hot, which we've been able to really, Mike's only been with us for a few months now, but we've already dialed in to a point where he knows what to listen for and change it. But if Greg's wah just comes in my ears in a certain hotness, I just go like this real quick, and he just knows to bring that down. That's just the wah. And that's the only thing I really need to know. If we're in a heavy jam and I'm losing Greg a little bit, then I'll kind of look and do a quick thing like that. But most of the adjustments are in between songs, or like when there's a break or a moment, aside from things that are like, hey, make sure that we're in a screaming jam that I can hear Jeremy's guitar a little bit, or like, it's just sort of stuff that makes sense to adjust over time. Just like a front of house sound guy knows to turn up the guitar in a certain moment, Mike knows when to adjust for me. But yeah, I am able to do it pretty quickly and not have to like point him up and down. It's just like, boom. Actually, before we got Mike, I printed out a little sheet, a laminated sheet that had my signals on it for the house monitor guy at a festival. Just be like, here, put this right there. And then what my signals are.
Nice.
Because they don't know what I like or what I don't like. But if I can give them a signal, that made it easier. And that just allows you to focus more on the show and not worry, am I going to just lose it in the middle?
A good sound crew is huge.
That's one thing about.
Reminds me of a story of Bob Rosengarten, a drummer, told me, working for the first time with a bass player, and he's looking at the bass player and he's going like this, and the bass player says, "You want me to play louder?" He goes, "No, play better."
Wow. That's a great.
So you guys can use that.
Gator, I'm glad you didn't learn that a few years ago.
I
Yeah.
won't start using that.
Yeah. You had many opportunity over the years.
There's a sort of an old-fashioned term, at least around here, called a train wreck, where a gig, everything just seems to go awry. And I wonder, we sometimes put them out of our minds, but do you guys have any memories of particular train wrecks on a gig?
As far as like a regular just touring headlining gig or a festival gig, nothing comes to mind as far as like, oh gosh, like, things just seem to keep getting worse. One kind of funny thing, which fortunately in the end, it never really ended up being too much of a thing, is we did get asked to play like a small award show one time at a local college, like the Maryland Music Awards, and we were asked to do one of the performances during the award show, which they cut to at any live performance. So we went in for a full day of rehearsal, and they had the full media crew there, all the spots, all the signals, they're gonna call you when this is when you start. We're gonna have all your amps on the settings they need to be. Everything's gonna be boom. They point to you, you go, you play your 3 minutes, you're done. So the rehearsal went pretty great. We weren't super comfortable in that environment. We're used to a much more, free flowing, not as much time constraint. It's hard enough to get one of our songs down to 3 minutes, let alone, perform in that environment. So we did it. It was all good. And then we got to the actual award show. Cut to us. I don't even think any of the amps they put out were like plugged in, let alone on. Like everything was just like, so I remember I started, and it was one of those situations where drums are just playing a groove. I'm just like, oh no, like I can see them playing, but I don't hear anything. So I'm like, I hope to gosh that everyone in the crowd is hearing something. Maybe my monitor is just out. Then you see Greg, the other guys that are trying to keep it together, but something's going on. So, the first minute of our 3-minute song was just
Drum solo.
So people are like, wow, this is a hell of a drum intro here. So, that I can remember, and like I said, out of any situation, it wasn't our show. It was typically that's not even really our vibe in general, is the award show type thing and the quick performances. But I do remember after that one, we all kind of just got off stage and just kind of went our separate ways. We're like, all right, I'll see you guys at practice tomorrow. And to be honest, it really wasn't even on, that one wasn't even on us. We were very prepared. And so that's the only one. I'll still drive past that college campus.
That's hilarious.
And I always have a good laugh.
That's funny.
There's Goucher College, home of the worst.
completely forgot about that. I must have put it totally out of my mind. When you first said train wreck, I thought, boy, for a musician, for a band, if a train hits a cow, that's a train wreck for the cow, but the audience on the train isn't going to even notice. They're just moving along. So a train wreck as a band is often we're just obliterated and just our parts are flying everywhere. And we're like, oh my God, that one's so bad. And then the audience who's riding on the train is just like, I didn't even feel anything.
I will say to that point, there have been a few shows where, not in a train wreck scenario, but like anyone, there's shows that afterwards resonate with you more than others. Or there's some that you're like, I don't really think we are quite feeling it tonight. And it is weird. Those few shows, whenever that happens, we'll go on like our fan page or something, or on our website or something, and every comment is like, show of the year. That was the one. Like we played recently at Caverns, which was a blast. Like it was still a great show, but I remember it was one of those ones where afterwards, sound wise, playing wise, we were just like, that could have been. And then the first thing you see is like, show of the year by Pigeons, Caverns, and you're just like, oh gosh. So
what are they hearing?
To your point, that's kind of that happens.
Well, everyone has their own. We're on stage. Our sound guy's looking at these walls of a cave that are just blasting off the high frequencies, and he's just like, I hated it. I had a horrible time. I thought the low end in there was kind of cool. So for what I was focusing on, it's like, well, that part of it at least worked for me.
Well, sound, but even also the playing wise, I mean,
Right.
I remember us not thinking it was our tightest, and
Yeah.
people were like, "You got to listen to the Cavern."
Well, and another thing that brought to mind when you started with that extended drum solo at the award show is when we were at Red Rocks.
Oh yeah,
we're playing an epic
arguably the
show.
coolest venue in the world, and
Yeah, and apparently every few months the power just cuts out in the middle of a set. And we were
the whole town power.
The whole
surge.
town of Morrison power surge. So we are in the middle of a song. We're in a chorus of water, boom. Everything cuts out. We look over. We're like, what's happening? You know, what's going on? Gator just keeps playing. So he goes into a drum solo. We go over, we talk to our monitor guy who was filling in at the time. He's like, they told me the power for the city is out. And I look over, I'm like, all right, let's get up on the drum riser and start playing drums with Gator. And we just get up there and just do this extended drum solo thing. You know, my go-to move in those situations is just hitting the cymbal. Psh, psh,
yeah.
You know, just like slowly bringing it down.
Typically when that happens, there's always that glorious moment of it popping back on and the crowd reaction's great. That one was, we were like 2.5 minutes in where I'm just like, I'm at the point where I can hardly play anymore. I'm like, without any sound, I'm clearly trying, I'm also trying to play as loud as I possibly can so that someone can hear it because all the mics are off. So
Luckily it was a natural amphitheater.
It got to a point where I almost had to be like, all right, like that's all I don't know what to do now. and
it lasted for a few minutes. I think we got a video up because we lost the soundboard recording, but I had my little GoPro on my amp going just for personal recollection of seeing the crowd. So we were able to use the audio and video from that and put it together. So there is a video where the audio switches to that. But then eventually it pops back on. The amps were on first. I know mine was cycling on for a bit. And then we started playing a little bit and the whole venue comes on and we cut right back in
to the chorus. Yeah.
Chorus. Oh, and yeah, when the power went out, the crowd chanted water. So
it going into a chorus.
It cut out and everyone's like, back on, and so Greg starts going like this and, you know, and we had seen the California Honey Drops the night before. If you haven't seen them, they were like, went from like a busking band to then like headlining Red Rocks. So they have this very loosey-goosey approach, and we'd seen them at Red Rocks the night before, and so it like kind of all conspired to be like, well, here we are. If this is a train wreck, you know, we're off the tracks, man. Let's do it.
Yeah,
you know?
Lemonade out of lemons.
It was.
It does provide for the moment coming back is always, that's the only silver lining, is it provides a pretty epic moment when everything does come back together.
Well,
it bonds the crowd together too.
For that, like in arranging music, when you take something out, you miss it, but when you bring it back in, it's like provides this boost that would not have happened if you hadn't taken it out.
There's also one of Gator's favorite bands is Humphreys McGee, and I've never understood the progressive, like just the proggy. I called it weird, or like the like kind of build up stuff that kind of makes me feel funny inside a little bit, until I thought about those moments where it's like you're creating a group dynamic of us versus them, where everyone feels a little uncomfortable with the music and then you resolve together. So you're kind of building this togetherness as a tribe of awkward, release. And power going out is a similar mindset to that too. It's like, oh gosh, what's happening? What are we going to do? And then we come back in. It's like, we made it through together. It's like bonding in a crisis situation, very low level. And when I realized that gave me a whole new understanding and appreciation for tension building in music altogether and how that works en masse.
What were the early days, years of the Pigeons like as far as touring and accommodations and
Yeah, it's definitely gone in a long way. I mean, Ben can even speak to it even earlier than me, but you know, when I joined the group, you know, on one hand it was known that these guys have a lot of momentum and that they're on they're definitely doing well and are going to continue to do well. But it was also very much in that, you know, initial phase of, you know, we're all stuffed in our white passenger van with our we're setting up, unloading gear all on our own, and doing the full production. And then after the show, we split up and we go meet fans and communicate. And hopefully one of them says, "Hey, I got a guest room with,
Oh
three
yeah,
extra beds and 2 couches." And
we would do set breaks. We would call it divide and conquer. It's like, all right,
yeah,
set break, divide and conquer. Now see
and
who you can find if we can have a place to stay.
and Ben can attest, a vast majority of those people that are like, "Yeah, I got plenty of room, come on over," are also, they want to hang out, which is fine, but you get there and it's like a tile floor with like a blow up mattress.
The
And
best was in it might have been Tuscaloosa or some Alabama town, where we went from one house, which was kind of more of a party, and then our drummer wanted a quiet spot, our old drummer, and so he found a spot, and then me and Greg went to this one guy who's like, yeah, I got some extra space. One of the rooms was the cat litter box room, and so all of the rug was filled with cat litter. Like
Yeah.
there was a box somewhere in there, and Greg was brave enough to go in there. I laid down in a tiny kitchen. I had to move the giant, classic like huge trash can, small college, apartment out of the kitchen and slept there. But on the flip side, we've met some of our longest, best friends, best fans, who, some of them don't really follow us as much as they would before because they have kids now, or a couple of them that I'm thinking of had kids at the time, and we woke up in the morning and heard these kids running around upstairs. We're like, oh, you have kids? That's wild. But we've made some of our best connections that way, and it was seen, especially early on, as, get out there and meet the people who are coming out to support you, and they'll tell their friends, and it's not just about the music, it's about the community that you begin to form in each town, and that's one way we did it. But
I think that was beneficial. And I think, a lot of, what's important is when you are in an upcoming group is kind of, going through that grind and doing it right. And, a lot of groups will be so, rightfully so, because it is a grind. A lot of groups will be so, they'll want to jump to that next step too quick, where we all get our hotel rooms or we get the tour bus or something. And, I think, to our credit, one thing we've done well at is kind of, treating it in the sense of, when we graduated to the next point, it wasn't like we were all just now getting our own hotel rooms. It went from, finding a place to crash to fitting 10 guys in one little hotel room, and still, using the van. A lot of groups will kind of just jump to that next step, and it can come back and hurt them. And like Ben said, even the small things, I think even just connecting with our fans early and kind of,
or connecting to each other as well. I mean,
going
for a
face
long
to
time
face.
we would share beds, and we'd get one hotel room for the four of us, and
Yeah.
that's how it was. And we still, unless we have an odd number of people, we always share hotel rooms. We don't get our own rooms as bands, as crew, as anything. I'm usually with the tour manager, so I can talk to him about what's coming up. Our sound guys stay together.
You want to be comfortable, but you also are not on vacation. You still is.
Good
Yeah,
way
and
to
again,
put it.
you connect more that way too. If we were in our own rooms, sort of like we'd be all isolated in our own worlds. Whereas if we stay together, we can kind of stay cohesive as a team. Tour bus is a similar thing. We're together. We don't get hotel rooms unless we have off days on the tour bus. We just
Unless we have
there.
an extended tour, like if it were just playing a smaller run or a weekend run, we get back in the white was van.
Yep.
We're
Ours was brown.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be smart with your finances and just treat the whole thing like the.
And that's another thing to be aware of. I didn't realize when I first started in a band how much I'd learn about trailer leaf spring axles, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is it. You want to get a tandem axle so you don't break a leaf spring every so often because we're overloading the trailer way too much with this and that. So we learned the hard way, middle of Indiana, having to get axles fused back together in Colorado on the way to Telluride.
Yeah, and you get to the end of the week, and the band leader says, "Well, we Bluetooth speakers this week, so your pay will reflect that."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so actually you owe us $20.
So what is the next? I'll wrap up with a hard question to answer. You're talking about, getting from this step to that step. What's the next step that for the Pigeons. Do you think ahead like that?
I think, definitely. I mean, on a personal level, I think we're definitely all, all aware of it. Some focus on, that more than others, but I think in general, we're all very, very aware of that. As when it comes to the business side and the growth of the band, it's hard to say. We're going to continue to just keep doing the things that have gotten us this far and surrounded us with people that have allowed us to continue this journey. I know on a more musical side, I think we've reached a level over the last couple of years of, I guess one way you could call it more of a maturity level as far as our playing, and trying to sharpen our skills while also like continuing to learn and try new things. And I think, one thing when we were young and upcoming and playing live is, for me personally, is it was always, so high energy, gun ho, like everything was just like, and it worked great because that's a lot of what our sound is. I think we've kind of taken a step with our writing and kind of the production side of developing songs more with more pocket and, more like showcasing melody lines as opposed to always just constantly pushing and being high energy. So on the business side, I think we just continue to keep doing what we're doing. But as far as the musical side, I think the last couple of years, especially with, we'll have a new record that's coming out in April, and I think a lot of that shows kind of a different approach to how we're all fitting into our pieces musically and kind of creating more of a pocket tight sound, as opposed to, not in a bad way, but as opposed to, it used to just be more of a full high energy kind of onslaught, which was great and worked for us as well. But
Yeah, there are a couple aspects to that question. From the business side of things, there's always unexpected things that you never could predict, like COVID, the pandemic. We were kind of cruising up towards growing bigger and bigger. We had done another national headlining tour with our good friends Goose, and then the pandemic hit and we kind of settled down. They started working on certain things and hit a moment, and they are playing arenas now. And for us, the pandemic kind of, it allowed us to re look into how we were growing and approaching it. And I wouldn't say it interrupted our growth, because it helped refocus it in a different kind of way, but it did change the trajectory for that period of time, and allowed us to kind of take the heat off of ourselves. And we started writing more together using remote applications, where we can share our music that we still use to this day, even though we still practice a couple times every week when we're home. So that opened up that avenue of writing songs together. And then also, like Gator said, we just love writing music. We love playing music. So we're going to keep writing just constantly. Even those albums coming out, we've written and debuted,
yeah, we have a
three.
couple other albums worth of new tunes.
Yeah, we've debuted 3 songs in the past couple months. One New Year's, 2 New Year's. Yeah, I think. And then just keep continuing to do that. And then on a slightly more esoteric level, from the way I see things, I've always looked at music, and my approach and our approach is like taking a microscope at like the 5x or 10x, and you're kind of zoomed in a little bit on the shape of music, and you get it centered in the middle, and then you jump up to 25x and then 50x and 100x, and it's a fractal. So you're going to keep uncovering new shapes as you go in, but you get the general concept of it, and you just zoom in more and clarify it over time. So you're never going to get to that final stage, but you're going to have it more in focus over time, and you're going to be more precise about where you're going as you kind of zoom in and have a more expansive approach to it as a group.
Wow. So these 2 interviews today are going to be a tutorial for those younger musicians who are out. They're down at this level, right? And they want to go. And so very informative. And I appreciate you talking about the band and your concepts, and it's quite inspiring.
Well, that's much appreciated to give us an avenue to talk about it. So
it's an honor to be here amongst such great company of
Yeah.
people you've interviewed. It's not a day goes by where all of us don't kind of look around like, wow, here we are, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to remember is
Excellent.
you're always enjoying where you're at, even at that small level. Like there's things to enjoy about laying on a rug with cat litter around you. Don't forget that.
You've come a long way, baby.
Yeah,
Well, maybe I'll see you in Utica, New York. My whole
absolutely.
family
Yeah, let
will
us
be
know.
there, and it'll
We
be
would
a
love to
gas.
see you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right,
Thanks, Monk.
over and out.